Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Retail innovation is one of those million-dollar phrases tossed out at meetings, boardrooms, and media across Canada. But what does it really mean? How do you make it happen? And how can we really recognize innovation when we see it? My very special guest on the Voice of Retail podcast for this episode is someone who lives and breathes retail innovation. Jose Ribau, Executive Vice President, Digital Innovation for CF Cadillac Fairview. In a long overdue interview, we talk about shopping center innovation, the tradecraft of knowing when you fail, and the gauntlet of frontline retail practitioners that guide the practical and the possible.
It's a great question. I will say that our work really started through the lens of the customer, and I know that's an overused description, but when I describe that, what I'm talking about is, the Amazon journey and how simple it has become for you to have a product arrive at your doorstep. And so we basically see that as a competitive journey to what it's like to show up at a property, go to a retailer.
Let's listen in now. Jose, welcome to the Voice Retail Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Thank you so much for having me. Fantastic. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Great to have you on the podcast. You're not my first guest from CF, but it's such an interesting organization, so I'm really thrilled you could make the time to join us. So once again, thanks. Yeah, listen, let's jump right in. Tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your background, and what you do at CF.
Well, I've been with CF for about 3 years now, coming on 4 next year. And essentially, I lead a team of experts over 3 domains, innovation, technology, and marketing. So essentially, we are the connective tissue of the organization, but at the same time, also driving forward into the retail and office space, defining new business models and trying to push boundaries in terms of what it means to be in real estate, both during a pandemic and coming out of a pandemic.
Right on. Well, of those 3, the most interesting to me, well, they're all interesting, but this idea of leading a team of innovation, that's really super interesting for me. The other 2 are, technology and marketing, that they're fun, but this whole idea of a role like innovation, we're really going to dig into that. But before we do that, CF would be well known to the listeners, of course, but just spend a minute. They may not understand the full scope and scale. So just give us a quick overview of CF so we get kind of a level set that everybody knows the scope and scale of your business.
Sure. So CF has a long history of essentially bringing people together, whether that's in business towers like the Toronto Dominion Centre or in some of our landmark real estate properties and retail, such as the Toronto Eaton Centre. We've built over the decades, what I would call first, A-class properties. There's 68 of them in Canada that we own and manage. And being owned by the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, it has allowed us to deploy capital and build new spaces for many of our Canadians and increasingly international partners to participate in. So, we have about $35 billion of assets under management across the Americas and the UK, and increasingly becoming more of a global footprint. And so our history is well grounded in real estate, commercial real estate, but increasingly we've been integrating ourselves into other parts of the ecosystem, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about today.
Mm-hmm. Well, what brought us here today is we wanted to talk about the CF Shop MasterCard gift card. That's kind of the one of the primary reasons we're here today. But before we get into that, I'm so intrigued by this idea about innovation and innovation, particularly in your category. Let's talk about the role in the industry of shopping malls and real estate development, and let's see how what innovation looks like pre and post COVID. I mean, it's not like retail and shopping centers was this halcyon days in 2019 where there wasn't much going on and everything was smooth sailing. So there's a lot of innovation happening there, a lot of transformation, and then COVID hit. So let's talk about pre and post, or pre and during, in terms of COVID, and how you define innovation and how you go about, what does that blank whiteboard look like? And then what does innovation look like and feel like for you and your team?
Yeah, it's a big question, but I'll break it up into a couple of pieces. Innovation in real estate used to largely be mainly about what tenants and client experience you could create to differentiate yourselves from your competition. And so that translated to different tenant mix, and that's still important. Mm-hmm. But as we know, e-commerce and omni-channel have deteriorated the physical experience over the last, call it 5 to 10 years, especially. And so leading into the pandemic, innovation really became a driving force for how do we stay relevant? How do we connect with consumers? How do we develop a platform that allows retailers to find clients, acquire them, retain them, grow them, and ultimately deliver new services? So really, from our perspective, innovation has never been about innovation theater. It's largely been about embedding ourselves in the right journey for that client. So many of the things we were working on before the pandemic actually got accelerated during the pandemic. So that allowed us to amplify things such as mall-based delivery and fulfillment, which is obviously important for buy online, pick up in store, or buy from store and ship. And increasingly, we found ourselves in a position where we could leverage our scale to help provide retailers with better pricing. We could leverage our scale to provide retailers with opportunities to connect with customers. And with COVID, we had to find new ways for customers to navigate the property. So we introduced, what I would say is one of the best shopping apps that you can find in the world. We have won some awards for it, but ultimately it allowed customers to put the directory in their pocket. And with that as a deep foundation, we've now moved into things like payments and allow customers to, again, they don't want to necessarily touch the PIN pad. They want to pay contactless. They're using their device to find the store. They might as well use their device to pay. And so that has allowed us to just keep rolling out services that help our tenants defend against e-commerce, but also leverage the omni-channel experience if they so desire to do so in the property itself.
Thinking about the innovations in the before time, pre-COVID, what ones would you say, and you've kind of given us a good introduction about, tenant mix not necessarily being the kind of innovation we're talking about today, but what are those innovations that led you to where you are today that you say, these were key stakes in the ground? You've mentioned a couple during the COVID era. So are those the ones you see, when you put forward what your team did to the board of directors, for example, you say, these are the things you should pay attention to because these are the innovations that are actually going to move the business forward, like table stakes versus differentiators. Like, is that the way you think of it as well in some of these key innovations?
It's a great question. I will say that our work really started through the lens of the customer. And I know that's an overused description, but when I describe that, what I'm talking about is, the Amazon journey and how simple it has become for you to have a product arrive at your doorstep. And so we basically see that as a competitive journey to what it's like to show up at a property, go to a retailer, touch the brand, have that human interaction, and ultimately have that product either delivered or pick it up or take it with you or take it home or take it to your car or take it on transit. So we looked at that journey in its entirety and developed innovation concepts. We ran them through a process to determine which ones were feasible across each step of that journey. As you said, we presented many of those to the board to make sure we had support, and then ultimately tested and ran multiple agile sprints at the same time across all of our properties, in fact. And anything that was not successful, we didn't proceed with. And the ones that did pick up steam and met with the client need, we did proceed with. And so that was the process that we used. But ultimately, we decided to rip the lens off what was historically a visit the shopping center, pick up a product, and CF was in the history of providing a great physical experience. And our malls are known for great sight lines and that great tenant mix. But what else can we do to stay ahead? And that's where we focused on bridging that digital with the physical world. And we think we're onto something because that seems to be how customers are shopping now. More and more.
I had the opportunity to speak to Professor Scott Galloway last week. You may know of him, but we were talking about innovation. We were talking exactly what we're talking about today. And I said, I'm not sure there was actually a lot of innovation during the COVID era. And he said, he agreed. He thought it was more acceleration than innovation. When you talk about doing different elements, a lot of those things were kind of foreseen. They got accelerated. Why is it hard to innovate in business and retail, and specifically in your category? Like when you sit back, these things don't come easily. And as you said, you've got sprints and multiple iterations. But why do you find it, and why do practitioners, retailers, and mall owners find it hard to innovate?
I'm a big fan of Scott Galloway, and I think he's certainly onto something. And I also appreciate his ability to push the envelope on what it means to be good for the planet, good for each other. And, we might have a chance to talk a little bit about that today. But, when it comes to the actual innovative process, innovation requires discipline and requires a group of dedicated individuals where this is one of the top 5 priorities for the company, either staffed in-house or partnering with external experts, or in our case, both. We certainly don't do it all on our own. And that relentless pursuit of that discipline, it actually has the potential for tissue rejection inside the company. It requires funding at a time when others are cutting back and when you're not hitting plan. And so when you look at a company who's having difficulty during the pandemic and asking that company to invest in digital experiences when we're not clear if customers will still be there at the other end of the pandemic, that's a very tall order. And so I think there's elements we put in place that kind of overcome some of those difficulties in real estate or in some of the other industries that we were able to be successful with. Had we not established that foundation before the pandemic, I think it would have been very difficult to start that process. And then the last thing I'll say is, back to my point earlier about not having innovation theater, we analyze and have KPIs for every single initiative that we try, test, or deploy. And we run everything through the lens of, is it desirable? Is it viable in the market? And is it feasible for us to actually get this off the ground? So it's quite analytical.
So you'll set standards of failure. In other words, if it doesn't perform to X, if it does Y, we'll consider that a failure. Which hopefully you have a few, because if you're not, I do believe that if you're not failing at a few things, you're not trying hard enough. Particularly in the innovation space, right? I mean, who gets it right every time? But I think
completely agree. Yeah.
I think
and by the way, I should also add. Sorry to interrupt, Michael, but I should also add. It's in partnership with your key stakeholders, right? So when I talk about, there's our team and then there's the broader organization. Yeah. Our property partners are the first to, and once we develop that strong relationship and trust, they're not shy to tell us when something isn't going to work or to help us pivot during the pandemic. The partnership with our property teams, who, as you know, are big supporters of the RCC and of the retail industry, are the first to tell us this is not what clients want. And so that is another element, is being humble enough to...
Do they always know? Like, the old... the old Ford saying, right? If I asked customers, they just would have wanted a faster horse kind of thing, Absolutely. Right?
No, but let's put it this way. We also don't want to do this in a vacuum. Sure. And so there's a fine balance. We consider them strong internal stakeholders and partners, but we also do the direct to client research with them. And so we have that ability to push the boundary and recognize that, they are an input along with everybody else. But we've tried very hard. Again, this is why it's difficult to do innovation inside a company. You're trying to balance all those different stakeholders, and but again, it comes down to, what are you trying to solve for? So if we were trying to solve for disruptive innovation every day, the model I'm describing probably wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. If we're trying to develop core innovation and what's called adjacent, where you're just slightly on the perimeter, then those stakeholder views are very important. Because for example, back to the gift card, if we wanted to introduce an electronic gift card, but our guest services couldn't help the customer purchase it, well, that's dead in the water. Right. So that's just an example.
I had a wonderful interview with a woman who's a futurist, and I kind of was intrigued by the whole idea, because I think you work a little bit in the future as well. And I was asking her about her tradecraft, because of course it's not just staring out wistfully in the sky and thinking about what will happen next. Talk about your team's tradecraft around the future, not just projects itself, but how far out do you look in that lens and say, here's where we think things are going, in a very broad sense. Do you spend some time, I guess we could call that ideation, but it is a much more rigorous process when done professionally, like the way you do it. Is that embedded in your process, or is that just nascent and part of it?
Innovation is discipline. And I'm going to make it sound really boring, but yes. So looking out, we dedicate a certain percentage of time. So I'll just give you myself as an example. I dedicate about 10% of my time to looking at what the future is. And of that 10%, I would say the future is already here most of the time. And so I'll give you one example.
It's just not perhaps evenly distributed as
correct.
Saying, right?
And so and this is an example I've used before and others have used, but just before the pandemic, I spent some time in Asia, and I visited with the Alibaba new retail group and the Hamas store, and went through purchase journeys that were all supported digitally, and I had the option of buying the product, putting it in my bag, having it delivered, having it picked up at the end of the shopping journey, and it was all done digitally on my device, but I was physically interacting with the store and with people in the store, and that has since transcended into live stream demos and the ability to buy those products from anywhere in the world. So the technology isn't the barrier. I think it's the structural opportunity within the stores and within the transaction flows for that to happen, but that's not happening in Canada, and it's not even happening at scale in North America. I mean, you've got the Amazon Go and a few other examples where you're starting to see it, but this was 2 years ago, and they were doing it at scale. Now, different demographic, different level of density, but that's an example of the future's already here. We just have to figure out how to go about doing that in partnership with our retailers.
And which future is going to work in, I'm always cautious about taking lessons from China. The market is so different, we've been talking about live stream coming to North America for a decade, but it's entrenched. But it does get me thinking more to our point today about things like super apps and apps. Now, you mentioned the live app. Talk a little bit about that and how it integrates and your vision about integrating with payments. So let's get us closer to what we're talking about today. But the live app, launching an app is not innovative in and of itself. How did you approach launching an app that would, in and of itself, so to speak, be innovative and move your agenda forward and then connect it to payments?
So you're exactly right. The idea of an app isn't new, but I think the idea of putting the digital directory in your pocket and being able to navigate the mall was an important first step. The second was allow customers.
Why do you think it took? It's one of those things that baffles me a little bit. It's one of the biggest pain points I have as a consumer in many big locations is just where is it? Where is something, right? That navigation. Yeah. It does seem like one of those things like, head slapping. We should have done this before. Why does it take so long for all of us to start thinking about location as a key priority? I love your app, by the way. I downloaded in a 3-dimensional view. I was going to Sureway today and I'm like, where is that store? I just literally used it this morning, but it's so fascinating to me. I mean, it must have been popping up year after year as a priority, but how did you finally get it done?
Well, first of all, thank you for downloading it and using it, and thank you for shopping at Sureway. I would say it's complicated once you get into the data. So it's one of those things where if you think about a property that has, let's say, 350, stores, and they're changing all the time, and the data for the location and the hours might change, the products within that store might change, and where it's located within the property. So on a daily basis and throughout the day, you got to have a process to land the data, cleanse it, make sure it's up to date and accurate, because there's nothing worse than sending yourself, Michael, to the wrong location. So customer disappointment is one. The second is the cost of setting it up, developing the architecture with the future view in mind. Also can be difficult for some to do. You can stand up a nation app that's not connected to anything, and you can do that overnight, and it won't really be valuable. But then you can't make any changes. And so I think once you get into the details of what it means to actually stand up that app and do it at scale across, in our case, 18 shopping centers, French and English, dynamic, updated real time. Yeah. And during COVID, we added capacity counters where the sanitization stations were, where curbside pickup was. There's a whole team of internal and external people who have to sustain it and run it all day, plus servicing in case it goes down. Yeah. You now have a little business within the team that's actually being run every day. So it is a logical thing to do, but it requires ongoing investment. And without naming names, I can tell you one of our peers in the States, after 2 years of trying, gave up on it because it became so difficult for them to do it without a big data platform.
It's a beast, right? As you can say, it's a beast to get all that stuff right, because you're absolutely right. You get one thing wrong and you've blown every bit of credibility that you had to begin with, right? Forget it. The store's moved. This thing's no good kind of thing. Yeah, so I can see that. Let's talk about the CF Shop MasterCard gift card. So that's one of the things that brought us here today. Tell us about what this initiative is, what you're doing. And first of all, as I said, tell us about what this product is, and then how it integrates into your innovation strategy and right in time for the holidays. So good timing.
So in a nutshell, this MasterCard-based prepaid gift card is available electronically. You can gift it, load it, send it. Your recipient receives it as a link, and within minutes you're up and running, and it's loaded into your Apple Pay or your Google Pay. So it's a contactless version of our physical gift card. So in a nutshell, that's what it is. It could not have been possible without the partnership with EML Payments, as well as MasterCard and Apple, in addition to our acquiring services provider, which happens to be TD Merchant Services. So it's a multi-dimensional program, as you can imagine. It's the first in its category. And there's no other company like us doing this within a closed loop environment. And we built it on the basis of what customers were looking for. So there are customers who want the physical plastic, so that gift card remains, and they want to put that in an envelope, et cetera. But now we've given the option to, gift it to someone electronically, and they can go and pay contactless on their device. So the idea of doing this came from the same customer research I talked about earlier. And customers were looking for something during the pandemic that allowed them to gift more easily without having to necessarily do a physical transaction. And
so just to be clear, it's retailer agnostic. So you can use it at any retailer in the properties. Talk a little bit about that.
And this is actually why we selected MasterCard as our partner, as our payment network. Their acceptance level covers our properties, covers 98% of retail, and is a great product that will actually work on the rails. We didn't want to risk something that obviously didn't work. So it's very helpful from a retailer perspective, because what we're doing is we're driving that in-person store experience. So even though it's electronic and digital, when the customer comes to the property, they're paying with their device. So they're physically tapping with their phone at the retailer, and then the spend for the transactions typically goes up when they're starting off with a gift card that someone's gifted them. So the redemption levels are quite high on the retailer's side. So they love the gift card program because it generally provides them with, an opportunity to capture some segments who might not have a credit card or have been given a gift. And so, yes, it is accessible by all retailers. And it's something that, by the way, we now have, because it's digital, we have the ability to do offers, custom offers. So we can pick a retailer and run a program for 2 weeks or whatever period of time and do a matching program, or have them go to store. If you do ABC, you get a top up on your gift card. You get an additional gift card. These are programs that we now have because we have it in the app. We actually are able to drive a different customer experience than before. And this is something that I've been talking about for the last number of years. Payments typically happens at the end of your shopping experience, but we should actually be embedding payments during the shopping experience. So what we're trying to do is move that customer through to say, look, here's a gift card. We've developed a partnership with X retailer. Go ahead and use it, and you're going to get a benefit. And that benefit might be gift with purchase. It might be an additional gift card. It might be a bonus. It might be a discount. And anytime we do those campaigns, we see the basket size is higher, and we see that the retailers end up benefiting from those additional visits.
Now, when you're thinking about those campaigns, you have some data about where that card's being used. Do you get down to campaigns where you try and do cross-sell, cross-shop, or just make the offers more relevant? Is that on the future roadmap as well?
Yes, and so I would say, we're early days. We literally just launched the product, but the goal
not to get ahead of ourselves, right? Yeah.
Well, no, but as you're correctly identifying, within the app, you can favorite brands and you can set up personalization. You can set up an account, and you have to in order to receive the gift card. Yeah. So once you've done that, and you know which brands you followed, that gives us data to go to those brands and say, look, there's 1,000 users who have favorited your brand, and we can run a campaign to try and leverage the funds to drive them to your store. and then do cross shop. Customers who shop at retailer A also shop at retailer B.
Sure.
And so over time we're going to use that data once we have enough scale to actually drive those cross shopping. And really, that's what customers are saying they want, right? Ultimately,
relevant offers. Yeah, they want
relevant. It's got to be relevant.
Yeah. Now you just don't have intention. You have actual behavior though with that card, right? So you know where they've shopped, and that's easier said than done in terms of coming up with what's next. But you've got a good sense of putting the two together, both intent and reality. Right now, you don't know if it's right now, it's always, when I ran CRM at Hudson's Bay, what used to baffle us a little bit some days is gifting, right? Is that for them? Am I going to spend them down the wrong place because they're buying gifting? Like, that's always a challenge for CRM programs, right?
Well, and I would say you're exactly right. The difference here is we have the audience.
Right.
And I would say for the retailers themselves, this from your own background and working in this space, like, it's very difficult for you to know who that customer is that's walking in your store.
Yeah.
The minute our app can become a vehicle to help you know who that client is, that's gold.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, it's a beautiful gold. Thing.
And so you're exactly right. We have intent, and we also have purchase outcome, and then we can track that to say, did it work? Yeah. And we're willing to invest in that. Like, this isn't just something we're putting on the shelf and saying, I hope it works. Like, we're actually backing it up. Back to our discussion earlier. In order for this to be successful, we've also got to have budget to help complement it. We know retailers are suffering during the pandemic. So we're trying to demonstrate to the industry that CF is here to help, not just in terms of rent negotiations and everything else that's been going on, but actually putting dollars and cents into offers, capabilities, and make sure that these retailers survive. And the customers come back to property, because that human interaction is something we're all missing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So it's a funny question to ask someone who's in charge of innovation, but what's next? I mean, you must be always thinking about what's next. What's on the whiteboard for 2022? Give us a glimpse into 2022 and, taking all these learnings from, I guess I was calling the post-COVID era, and I'm not sure anymore. The goalposts keep moving pretty fast, but what's next? What's, you've just launched so many interesting things, but anything you can talk about for the whiteboard for 2022?
Well, I'm sitting in my office, which is overlooking the Toronto Eaton Centre this morning, and the way I got into the building was I used a different innovation that the team's also launched called CF Concierge, which is a digital app for office. And so now imagine the beauty of us marrying those two into that super app experience, where I could go as a CF tenant employee working at a client who is in one of our towers, and then going to the Toronto Eaton Centre for some shopping and using a digital app to recognize offers, etc.
Right.
Imagine we're going to be able to stitch those two journeys together, office experience and retail experience, and have those products held for me, delivered to my floor, taken up to my office, potentially put in my car. So we're going to basically be bringing together these two experiences into one journey, which again, for anybody who's thinking about what are some of the benefits of returning to the workplace, we have a vested interest in making sure people return to the workplace safely, but also that it's interesting, that they can go and shop and eat in our restaurants and have a seamless experience and stitch that back to the property. So over time, this live by CF app and our CF Concierge will ultimately come together, and you'll have everything from food delivery to mall-based fulfillment to, products and retail offers and payments. Right. And so we see a day throughout the next, call it 18 months, where we're going to be, with the luxury of a bit of time now to plan. This is one of the things I love about CF is we don't sit idle, in our space just because people are, struggling with when can I return to work, and cases are up again in Ontario, et cetera. But in our case, this is the time we're taking to actually design those roadmaps and start putting plans in place to execute so that we're ready.
Well, I love where you're going with that, because my mind casts forward to a property like Sherway, which has got a lot of residential around it, right, built in, and that's a big part of the future probably of major malls, where you've not just got commercial, but you've got residential. So my mind starts to wander about how these all things stitch together.
You're
interesting. Right. Yeah, listen, this is super interesting. Where can listeners go to find out more, connect with you? Are you a LinkedIn guy? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm very prominent on LinkedIn, for sure. So you can find me there. It's pretty easy to follow and connect with me there. For the gift card itself, especially when we're entering into the holiday season, I encourage people to go to cfshopcard.ca and you can buy and send this card. I encourage you to try it out for yourselves and then reach out to us either on social media, Cadillac Fairview, or CadillacFairview.com, and we will certainly help you, especially on the retail side. We're open for business and we want to help you survive and connect with customers. So those are our channels, and we're very much on there. And I want to appreciate everything the team has done to help us get to this point, especially given how hard it's been to do this remotely, and also the RCC and Michael, your role in terms of bringing this podcast forward, because I think it's very important for the industry to have a voice, and no better voice than yours. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm only surprised that it took us this long to get onto the mic, or hopefully in the future into the same room together. I've been wanting and hearing your name quite often. So many people respect what you're doing at CF. So it's great to have you on the podcast. Good way to start our journey together. And I think my personal opinion is innovation. This period of COVID, for some retailers, they were, let's just get through it. Others are just, we have supply chain issues. I think real innovation in the retail sector, we're going to go through a 3-year period of just incredible innovation. You're a great poster child for that. So thanks again for joining me on the Voice of Retail. And I wish you continued success and look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate your time and your interest in what we're doing, and good luck to you. And I hope you stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at emmyleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe. Have a great week.